Hello, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going over 10 new infinite and instant win combos with the new Secrets of Strixhaven set. It's only day 2 or day 3 of spoiler season, but we already got a bunch of good ones that can go infinite in standard, in commander, in modern, historic, some older formats as well. So we're kind of jumping around formats, but let's jump right into our first infinite combo here using the Molten Core Maestro, which is 2 mana for a 2/2. A Goblin Bard with Menace, and it's got the Opus ability. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. But if 5 or more mana was spent to cast a spell, you add an amount of red mana equal to this creature's power. Now, as long as this creature's power is 5 or more, the Searing Touch will go infinite with this. So there's a bunch of other cards that also have buyback that could potentially go infinite with this. This one's the very simple Searing Touch, which is just 1 mana that does 1 damage to target creature or player, but has buyback of 4. So if you pay 5 mana, you return it back to your hand. Now you can kind of see where this is going. If this guy has 5 power and you cast Searing Touch, you're going to get that mana back, and then you're also going to get the Searing Touch back in your hand. You can cast it again, and you get the mana back. You actually start netting mana over and over again, and you can generate extra mana. You can also do infinite damage by casting Searing Touch over and over again. It also puts, I guess, infinite +1/+1 counters on this guy. Not that you necessarily need that if you can do infinite damage to any targets. So this is a very simple 1-2 kind of combo. Seems pretty strong, could be pretty good in Commander. Older formats where Searing Touch is legal, I believe Legacy. Let me know if there's any other formats I'm missing that this one could work in, but seems like it could be pretty decent as the cards are okay on their own. And Goblin, this Molten Core Maestro, I think is pretty strong card just in general. There's probably some cool standard combos that might be coming to the channel with this as well, so stick to the channel for that. But this one is a very simple 2-card combo that goes infinite. All right, let's go to our next sort of buyback infinite combo, making infinite saprolings with the new Witherbloom the Balancer, which is 8 mana for a 5/5 Elder Dragon. It has affinity for creatures, and it has flying and death touch, but most importantly, it has instants and sorcery spells you cast have affinity for creatures. Now, a Sprout Swarm, this one has buyback for 3, and it costs 2, and you can also convoke it to pay for the green mana cost in it. You can put it puts a +1/+1 1/1 green saproling creature token into play. Excuse me, and so basically you can use that saproling token to tap for the green in the Sprout Swarm when you play it again. Now, you will need to have, I guess, 4 creatures in play, although Witherbloom counts itself as a creature, to reduce the cost of the Sprout Swarm down to just 1. And then you can just use the Saproling to convoke the Sprout Swarm again, buy it back to your hand, then tap the Saproling to cast it again, buys back to your hand, and you just go infinite and create infinite Saproling tokens. They would all be tapped. You wouldn't win right away, but it would create instant saprolings. If you had something that did a damage or gained life whenever a creature came into play or something like that, you could go infinite life, infinite damage. Some easy ways to go infinite with this one. So pretty cool combo. This card just seems like a pretty good card in general. Witherbloom, the Balancer. Got some ideas, some fun stuff to mess around with in standard as well. But yeah, let me know if you have any other cool combos with this card, because I'm sure there's a bunch of other ones that it can kind of go infinite with. All right, we got the new Professor Delian Fellow, which can create infinite life drain with Bloodthirsty Conqueror. This is a standard combo. And Bloodthirsty Conqueror does go infinite with a bunch of other creatures in standard and other formats. But this is a new one it's Witherbloom, so you do have to play green for this combo. So let me read the card. It's 4 mana, Planeswalker, 5 loyalty, +2 to gain life, 0 to draw a card and lose a life, -3 to destroy target creature, and -6 you get an emblem with. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. So the last one, the emblem, is what we're kind of after here. And you could curve these into each other still, because it starts with 5 loyalty, you can play this on 4, +2 to go up to 7, and then you could play the Bloodthirsty Conqueror the next turn, -6, and then whenever your opponent would lose a life, or whenever you gain a life, then you go infinite, because these 2 abilities of the Bloodthirsty Conqueror, whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life, and then the Professor, his ability, whenever you gain life, your opponent loses that much life, they just trigger each other infinitely over and over again. This card does have more utility, I would say, than some of the other options of ways to go infinite with Bloodthirsty Conqueror. So it might just be a better choice if you're going to play this combo that you're going to use this as the other side of that. However, there's some downsides, I think, to this card because your opponent can sort of attack it as it being a planeswalker, and you do have to ultimate it to get the ability. It doesn't just statically automatically appear on the card. You do have to go up to 7 loyalty and then -6 it. So not sure if it's necessarily better than other options, but I think it might be just as a standalone card in a sort of Witherbloom deck. You could just kind of throw these two cards together and maybe go infinite. So something to try out in standard, I think. Seems pretty powerful, of course, whenever you can kind of have an incidental infinite combo with two cards. And both these cards are, decent on their own. So that's pretty exciting. It's something I might try out on the channel. All right, let's go to our next one here. This one, I got two Berta combos. The Wise Extrapolator, which is 4 mana for a 1/4. Legendary Frog Druid. It's got increment, so whenever you cast a spell, if the amount of mana you spend is greater than its power or toughness, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. And whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on it, you add 1 mana of any color. But most importantly, it has this ability, at least with this Intruder Alarm combo. The other one kind of uses the other side of Berta, the other piece of Berta. But this one is using the ability that you can actually just pay 0 to create a 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token. You don't have to put any counters on it. It will immediately die, but it would trigger Intruder Alarm, which says whenever a creature comes into play, you untap all your creatures. So that would untap the Berta again. You could tap it to create another 0/0, and then just go infinite, make infinite 0/0s. Now, by itself, that doesn't really do anything. You need to have some way of, like, whenever a creature comes into play, your opponent loses a life, takes a damage, you gain a life, some sort of payoff for this. Or even, like, whenever a creature is put into the graveyard or dies, it triggers because the 0/0 will die. So you could go infinite that way. But Alter the Brood might be kind of like the easiest way to just go to win with this. It's just a 1 mana artifact that says whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent puts the top card of their library into their graveyard. So mills them out, basically, if you had this combo. So another way to use Intruder Alarm, you could play this as your commander, so the combo could kind of be in your command zone or part of the combo. So that's kind of cool, I guess. If you're playing a Berta commander deck, you probably would want to include Intruder Alarm, I guess, if you want to, go infinite in your commander deck. Totally up to you, but that is an option. So yeah, another Intruder Alarm combo. We finally broke it. Let's go to the other one that uses the three tree Scribe and Shrieking Drake. This one, I believe, is modern legal. Shrieking Drake is 1 mana for a 1/1. And when it enters, you return a creature you control to its owner's hand, so it can return itself over and over again with just 1 blue mana. And then 3 Tree Scribe says, whenever it or another creature you control leaves the battlefield without dying, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So this is using the Bird's ability of whenever a +1/+1 counter is put on it, you add mana. So if you have all 3 of these, you play the Drake. It comes into play, and you can bounce it back to your hand, and then that triggers the 3 Tree Scribe to put a +1/+1 counter on the Berta, and that gives you a blue mana to recast the Drake, and then you can just do that over and over and over again. It would put infinite counters on Berta. It would also give you kind of infinite come into play abilities. So again, if you had something that said whenever a creature comes to play, you gain a life, that would give you infinite life, things like that. So there's some kind of interesting ways to use this. Maybe could be kind of a jank modern combo, something like that. But all the pieces are fairly cheap and okay on their own. So I don't know. Let me know what you think about this one in the comments below. And there's probably, I should say, there's probably a lot of other combos with Berta. These are sort of some of the ones I saw or thought of that could be pretty simple, but there's maybe some other better combos and also some fun uses maybe in standard for this card as well. We'll see if I can come up with some fun stuff with that one. All right, let's go to the Pensive Professor, which is another increment card. 3 mana for a 0/2. It says whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on this creature, you draw a card. And it goes infinite with 2 cards, actually. So I put both the cards that it goes infinite with. One of them, the Lilo, is, I think this is only commander legal, but it has the opposite text, which is whenever you draw a card, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. And so you can see Pensive Professor's ability is the mirror reflection of that. Whenever a +1/+1 counter is put on that, you draw a card. So the two of them trigger each other over and over and over again, and you can just not necessarily infinite because you probably don't have infinite cards in your library, but depending on how many cards are in your library, you can draw that many or put that many +1/+1 counters on the Pensive Professor. So pretty cool, sweet combo. They kind of even curve into each other. And Lila could even be your commander if you are playing it commander. The wizard class, though, I think this is historic legal, I believe, and pioneer legal, I think. Let me know. Yeah, I think wizard class, pioneer legal. So wizard class, the level 3 ability is whenever you draw a card, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So this one is, again, the same ability as Lila, but it's an enchantment. It also has the level 2 ability of drawing cards, so that you can kind of, I don't know, maybe draw into the Pensive Professor. So some interesting stuff there. Yeah, I don't know, could potentially see some competitive play, or at least some kind of jank combo potential. I think with the wizard class, though, you have to be careful because it says put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. You can't really stop. There's no may clause on any of those, so you want to make sure you have a different creature besides the Pensive Professor, otherwise you'll mill yourself out. I think so. Let me know in the comments if that's right, but I think if you just had this as your only creature, you would just go infinite but draw your entire deck. You couldn't stop it unless you had another creature to target. So something to keep in mind if you're going to try out that combo. All right, let's go to our next one here, the Exhibition Tidecaller. This one, pretty strong mill card, I would say. Could even see some play in Modern, but I'll read the card first and then explain this combo, which is a 1 mana 0/2, and it's got Opus. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, target player mills 3 cards, and a 5 or more mana was spent to cast the spell. The player mills 10 cards instead. So pretty efficient mill card. Can do a lot of milling for just 1 mana here. But this does go infinite with Underworld Breach, where that is still legal, which is in a lot of places. Although I think it actually is legal in Historic, which is interesting. As well as, I think, Manamorphose. So you could maybe try this in Historic on Arena. So what this does is, Underworld Breach says each non-land card in your graveyard has Escape. The Escape cost is equal to its mana cost plus exiling 3 other cards from your graveyard. So anything that kind of you can play and get the mana back for the spell that you're playing as an instant or sorcery will trigger the Exhibition Tidecaller. Now you're targeting yourself here with the Exhibition Tidecaller, and then the 3 cards that you're milling you're using as the cost for the Underworld Breach to recast, say, Manamorphose, which gives you mana to replay itself from your graveyard, but also will draw you a card, so you can kind of just go through your library as much as you want with this, kind of milling out a bunch of your cards, drawing a bunch of cards, and then maybe Thassa's Oracle for the win, something like that, if that's legal in the format that you're playing this. Legacy, is this legal in Legacy or Vintage, maybe? I don't think it's even legal Legacy. Vintage, I think, Underworld Breach. All the pieces are pretty cheap here, so maybe it's worth trying in some of the older formats. I think Historic, though, this would be legal or timeless, so you could try it there as well. Yeah, let me know if you think this one has some competitive potential. Could be. And all the pieces are very cheap, of course, so pretty nice mana cost wise. I don't know, price wise, actually. That's true. Okay, Harden Academic is our next combo. 2 mana for a 2/1. This is a Lorehold card with Flying and Haste, and discard a card. The creature gains lifelink until end of turn. And then whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. This card's pretty cool. It does a lot of different things. Kind of an aggressive flying creature. Lifelink to gain some life. An unlimited discard outlet. So there's other kind of cool uses you could have. Cool but rude uses you could have with this card, especially in Standard. But in older formats, this one, in Modern, you could pull off with any creature that has Persist. You can kind of go infinite with its last ability. Whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Because Persist says when the creature dies, and then it comes back with a -1/-1 counter. Now that's going to trigger this card leaving a graveyard ability, because it's going to go to the graveyard and come back. And then you can put the +1/+1 counter on the creature that came back, which would remove the -1/-1 counter, and you can rinse and repeat if you have sort of an unlimited sacrifice outlet like Viscera Seer, or there's tons of sacrifice outlets. That's kind of the cheapest one I could think of. But with Murder's Redcap in particular, you would be able to just do infinite damage to your opponent and win the game. And all these cards are kind of decent on their own, so this could be pretty good. I mean, this is there's a lot of infinite persist enablers that already exist. This one is maybe the most aggressively statted, or just kind of good card on its own. And it has some utility with discards, and maybe there's, I don't know, some sort of hybrid reanimator deck you're playing with this. Not sure, but it is another option to go infinite with persist. Okay, so let's check out our next one. This one, it does go infinite, sort of, but it is bound by the amount of mana you have. But infinite ancestral recalls is pretty cool. And Displacer Kitten, I think, with all sorts of the prepared creatures, kind of goes infinite. It's really good with this because a lot of being able to cast Ancestral Recall over and over again is pretty good. Well, let me read Emeritus of Ideation, which is 5 mana for 5/5. Flying Ward 2 enters prepared, and then this creature, whenever it attacks, you can exile 8 cards. If you do, it becomes prepared again. So the way to cast the card on the right, if you're not familiar with the prepared cards, is if the creature is prepared, you can just cast it from exile once, and then it becomes unprepared. However, with Displacer Kitten, which says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you exile a creature or a non-land permanent, and then you bring it back to the battlefield. You basically just blink the Emeritus, and then it comes back and prepared again. They can cast Ancestral Recall again, and then just keep recalling over and over and over again. You could maybe just target your opponent, mill them out, make them draw their whole deck, I guess. Again, this is bound by the amount of blue mana that you have. Maybe there's a way that if there's some card that says, whenever a creature comes into play, you get a treasure or something. I'm not sure how to make this fully infinite, but Displacer Kitten seems very good with all of the sort of prepared creatures. We broke Displacer Kitten, yes, I know. Definitely is a card that breaks a lot of things, but is especially really good with prepared creatures. Okay, so let's go to the Sanar combo, which makes infinite treasures, sort of. You do have to sacrifice them, but so another prepared card. We're not really using it for the prepared ability here. We're just using it for the ability to tap to create a treasure token. And you do have to cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn. Could display like a cantrip or something like that to meet that requirement. And it is a 2 mana for a 0/4. So, dodges some removal in that regard, which is kind of nice. But if you can activate it to tap a creature, or tap to make a treasure, to tap this creature to make a treasure, and you have put Freed from the Real on it, you can then sacrifice the treasure, make a blue, and then untap it, and then tap it to make a treasure, and rinse and repeat. So you basically, again, create infinite treasures coming into play and leaving play. And if you do, again, have something like Alter the Brood, or anything that, when an artifact comes into play, pings your opponent, when an artifact leaves play, does a damage, something like that, then that could also just be a payoff for this. So this can kind of go infinite, maybe can even be your commander, something like that. You could try it that way, but some fun infinite potential with Sanar. And then let's see, our last bonus combo here is this one I posted on my socials, and people seem to enjoy it. The Ral Zarek guest lecture, giving you essentially five extra turns if you're playing in a 1-on-1 format. So Ral Zarek is 3 mana for a 3 loyalty, and it has +1 to surveil 2, -1 any number of target players each discard a card, and -2 to return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. But most importantly, if you ultimate it, you flip 5 coins. And target opponent skips their next X turns. X is the number of coins that came up heads. So you could do this and just miss all your coins, and then you don't get basically any extra turns. But if you had Edgar, King of Figaro, which is standard legal, it has a 2-headed coin, which is the first time you flip one or more coins each turn. Those coins come up heads, and you win the flips. So you basically will win all your flips here and just take 5 extra turns, which will probably, it doesn't outright win you the game, it'll probably win you the game. Just attacking with Edgar, I suppose, in those turns would probably be enough to win. Hopefully you can, make your opponents, discard a bunch of cards and do a bunch of stuff and win the game with 5 extra turns. Probably not too hard, but that could be fun to try to pull this off in standard. Let me know if you want to see that on the channel here, or if you have any other fun brews, cool combos that you're thinking about with any of these cards from Strixhaven. This set seems pretty cool, pretty fun, some exciting stuff. And I know we're only into like day 2 and 3 of the spoiler season here, but these were a bunch of combos that some of them I saw and some of them just thought of and thought would be pretty cool to share. And so I may do a follow-up video if there's some other, cool cards that get spoiled. And let me know if you want to see that. So stick to the channel for that. Like, subscribe to stick to this channel. And then, I'll be playing in early access for this event. If you have any other cool ideas or decks you want me to build for that, I will consider that. I always have a whole bunch of brews that I want to try. I never have enough time to try them all. But that is something coming up in a few weeks. And then, of course, gameplay on Arena for all of the combos as well. So let me know your comments below. Thanks so much for watching. Really appreciate it. Shout out to any members who have helped support the channel. That means a lot to me. So really thank you for that. And thank you for watching to the end of the video. That also really supports the channel as well. So hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.